So all of these dates that we've been talking about this whole time are a long time ago. We're talking thousands of years when the Hebrew text was written and cataloged, and even the earliest manuscripts of the Masoretic text are from about 1000 AD. Think of the things that have happened in 1,000 years, from 1000 to now. But a discovery in the middle of the 1900s would change the way we think about the Hebrew text completely, and that's the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I feel like people talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, but we don't always know what they contain, what they're about, and how they impact the Hebrew text. So we're talking Dead Sea Scrolls on Bootleg Bible College. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on the earth. That is, the surface of the water is lower than anywhere else on the earth. At 1,400 feet below sea level, the surface of the water of the Dead Sea is just way down there. Everything sort of just flows into the Dead Sea. And I'll put up a little map here so you can see. I feel like that's always helpful for contextualizing what's happening in the Bible. But you see the Sea of Galilee here at the north, and then the Jordan River connecting, flowing directly into the Dead Sea, and you have the Dead Sea here at the bottom, which is this sort of dry, deserted area. I mean, there is no living visually living creature in the Dead Sea because of how saline the water is. At 33%, the water is just so salty that you just float on the top. Like your body doesn't even sink down in this sort of water. Compare that to the seas at like 3 to 4%. It is crazy how much salt is in and around the Dead Sea because of everything sort of flowing into it. And so you think of the Dead Sea in terms of these great stories of the Old Testament and New Testament, like Saul hiding out and running from his enemies, to even Jesus being taken out into the desert and tempted. This would have been this Dead Sea area, and you can see the primal, it kind of takes the place in the middle of all of this story, right by Jerusalem and Jericho. The Dead Sea is an important place for the history of the Bible, and the writings were all done sort of in and around the Red Sea area. So in 1946, a group of shepherds were out, and one of the shepherds lost a sheep and went to find it, left his flock. This isn't like a biblical parable. This is literally what happened. So the shepherd goes out and finds some caves around the Dead Sea. There's just these like straight cliffs with caves carved into the limestone all around there, and finds a cave where he thinks his sheep might have gone, and sort of kind of scared out or see what's in there, he throws a rock in there and hears pottery shattering. And because this is not a normal occurrence, he decides to investigate and finds all these old pieces of pottery in this cave. And some of them are empty, but some of them have documents, like really old looking documents. And not knowing what these documents possibly were takes him to a antiquities dealer locally. And the antiquities dealer, understanding the value, snaps them up really fast, takes them off his hands, and suddenly word starts spreading around that some new documents have been discovered that are possibly around the time of the Bible, and it becomes huge news around the world. Scholars start flocking to the Dead Sea region, searching for other similar documents. And since that time period, about 12 caves have been discovered, 900 different pieces of manuscript. I mean, there's like thousands of just fragments of these documents, and they are this huge treasure trove of documents that have been found like in our lifetime, in this century. And so it changes forever the way we think about the Hebrew Old Testament and how we look to it. And we'll dig into some of those reasons why here. So the first way that these help with the understanding of the Hebrew Old Testament is in the actual Hebrew. The documents are written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and in Greek. And so if you remember, we talked about how there aren't a lot of other writings outside of Hebrew, outside of the Bible that are in Hebrew, which makes language studies more difficult. Well, this is a cache of documents written in Hebrew, a lot of them biblical, some of them not, some of them, political or outside of these spheres. They're in the realm of just everyday living, some of these documents. And so what scholars found incredible was that the Hebrew that we have from about 1000 AD, remember from the Masoretic text, match very, very closely to these documents written almost 1200 years before that are found in these caves, which is just kind of crazy. Think about 12 to 1300 years of just time of the possibility of textual corruption being found to be not really existent, that the Masoretic text really does attest to these older writings, which gave scholars a lot more belief and a lot more trust in the text of the Masoretic text being correct, the Hebrew scriptures that we have being correct. The Dead Sea Scrolls also help us understand the New Testament, not in that there's writings from the New Testament, but that they speak to the time in which Jesus lived. This was a group of religious people that lived out in this Dead Sea area called the Essenes, and they were sort of hermits and kind of lived away from everybody else, as you can see by living in the desert in caves around the Dead Sea. But this group collected these writings and wrote them down, but they shed amazing light into the culture of the New Testament in which Jesus walked and in which the early church forms. There's a big mistake that a lot of people have when they come to interpreting the Bible, which is taking our culture, our cultural lens, the way we view the world, our understanding of how the world's even put together, and we superimpose that on the biblical text. And that doesn't sound like it would mess up a lot of things, but you have to think about over the last 2,000 years, how much culture has really changed. Right? I mean, let's not even, you don't even have to get into the Industrial Revolution to think about how many things have changed in 2,000 years. That is a lot of time, and that's a lot of cultural perspective to be bringing into the text. And so when we have texts that sort of enlighten us about the world of the New Testament, it makes us better interpreters of the New Testament. And that's a huge part of what the Dead Sea gives us. It also confirms the text of the Septuagint, which is really important. Remember how important the Septuagint is. That's the main Bible still used by Eastern Orthodox, for instance. I mean, it's an important part of this first translation. And so the Dead Sea Scrolls are so old and so, in tatters. I mean, even certain light, like UV rays, hitting them in certain ways can degrade the way that these documents. And so only a handful of scholars are actually allowed to handle these documents, to photograph them, to interpret them, and to work with them. And so the process over the last 50, 60 years has been really slow in uncovering the mysteries of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are still things being discovered comparing the text of the Dead Sea Scrolls to the text of the Hebrew Bible. That work is still ongoing, and there are people who are devoting their entire lives to discovering the mysteries the Dead Sea Scrolls can bring us. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff that happens around the Dead Sea Scrolls. If you're feeling kind of nerdy and want to, I'm going to link the Israel Antiquities Society, and it is a website that sort of shows you everything in the Dead Sea Scrolls, lists the catalog, what they contain, where they were discovered, and it'll list out for you sort of these time periods that certain fragments are probably from. It is a very robust site and very helpful for understanding the text that is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so I'll link that. Go check that out. That is some fascinating stuff, I think, and really helpful for understanding what the Dead Sea Scrolls contains. So I get lost in that sort of thing, like just discovering like what parts of Isaiah are found in the Dead Sea and how those, there's just a lot of nerdiness that can go on there. So I encourage you to do that if you are feeling like up to that task. Go check that out. And next week, we're going to be wrapping up this series on the Hebrew text. We're going to sort of try to bring all these last 5 weeks together to coalesce into an idea of where the Hebrew comes from, how we use it, and how it's put together today. So make sure you're subscribed so that you know when that video comes out. I'd love for you to like this video just to help get the word out about Bootleg Bible College. Also, leave a comment for me with your favorite fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Or if anybody's been to Israel, comment what the Dead Sea was like. I would love to hear it. I've never gotten to see it in person. So let me know, and yeah, we'll see you next week at Bootleg Bible College.